Good morning, church family. Ray, thank you for songs that you led this morning. Congregation, thank you for singing along with Ray. I know it's a choice that you have, and I'm glad you chose to sing along. It's a blessing already this morning. So, there's been a lot that goes on with this church family, goes on in our community, goes on in our country. And there's a lot of those things that are wonderful and joyous, and then there's a lot of those things that strike you wrong and make you angry. And so I want to just ask, what is it that makes you angry? Maybe it's people not listening to you. I mean, if they just listened to you, they'd be all right. Things would be all right. Maybe it's people taking advantage of you, taking advantage of others. That makes you angry. People who don't get out of your way, whether you're driving or you're a faster walker than the person in front of you. Does that make you angry? Maybe you get angry with yourself. Maybe, hypothetically there's a situation like you just can't catch a foul ball. That was for Ryan Lux. I wasn't there, but apparently he can't catch a foul ball. I heard the story already, so now everyone else will have to ask him the story. But maybe you get angry with yourself on that. Maybe it's plenty of other things that you can get angry with yourself. Personally, here's a few things that make me angry. Yeah, okay, so you see it. So at least, all right. So maybe you can catch the, This is classic, not my job, people. It's not my job to put the manhole back where, that one, I don't know if this one bugs anyone else. Do you notice that? Light switches. Center, left, and right. You got to be kidding me. Wire it up properly. Why? Oh man, that would bug me every time I had to turn those lights on. Speaking of lights, auditorium's still pretty bright. But can you? For one, the one on the left here, can you see that? It takes a little bit, but the one on the right, that's the one that cracked me up. I was staring at it for a while ago, and then when you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like, oh my word. One of the comments that I really liked on that particular one was saying, leave it like that. It looks lovely. And I'm like, that person is not my friend. It's not a friend of mine. Things like this, they shouldn't, but they bug the tar out of me. And I physically get angry whenever I see some of those things that someone just neglected. Maybe it's my OCD kind of nature, but man, it boils my blood. And every one of us has those types of things, right? We have those things. I don't know what it is for you, but I would find that thing, we could all find that thing within you that just sets you off. And it just makes you angry. Being called out in a sermon, maybe, Lux, right? The thing is, anger is real. We all know that. Anger is real, and anger is a real problem in our world. We have seen that. And if truth be told, if we're honest with ourselves, anger is a real problem within us. Because all of us deal with anger in different ways, and we deal with it in different measures of health. But we all have to deal with anger because there are just things in this world that are there are things to be angry about. There are plenty of things. The thing is, anger wants so desperately to be our master. It wants to be in charge of us. It wants to control our thoughts, to control our feelings, control our perspective, to control our words, our relationships. Simply put, anger wants to control your life, and it will if you let it. So this series, we've been talking about finding freedom from all sorts of different things that try to enslave us. Anything that pulls us away from God is something that we need freedom from. So this morning we're going to be talking about having freedom from anger. Psalm 37 verse 8 says, stop being angry. Just makes it really simple for us, right? That's the advice if you've been dealing with anger. Stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Don't lose your temper. It only leads to harm. And I think the psalmist is right. We all need freedom from anger. So this morning we're going to be talking about maybe a way or two, some things that will help empower us to break free from the shackles of anger in our lives. But we need to start with a question. It's a fairly simple question, but it's very necessary because it has theological implications of how we're going to deal with anger. So the question is this: is anger always wrong? Is anger always bad? Well, short answer is no. No, it's not always bad. It's not always wrong. Ephesians 4:26 says it this way: in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, or some might say on your wrath. Some translations might say that. In your anger, do not sin. Anger in and of itself isn't the problem. Sin is obviously the problem. Sin is the problem, but anger in and of itself is not the problem. It's what we do with anger, or maybe better said, it's what anger does in us that is the problem. What we allow anger to do in us can be the problem. In your anger, do not sin. That means that there are certainly things in this world to be angry about. Anger is the proper response to certain situations that we find ourselves in this world. Maybe it's when we find out or when we see that children are abused, when they're trafficked, whenever they are hurt, when they're killed. Maybe it's when the vulnerable are taken advantage of. These are reasons to be angry for sure. When injustices prevail in our society, things that are worth being angry about. When someone puts the toilet paper roll on backwards. These are things never mind, that's not a thing to be angry about. It's something that frustrates me as well. I mean, do it the way the patent tells you to do it. I'm just saying, there's a reason. Soapboxes that don't matter. That's what I'm hitting on this morning. I apologize. When you talk about anger, it's a lot of things that really don't matter, right? That's what happens to us. But the thing is, anger isn't the problem. What we do with it is. We know, in fact, if you go through all of Scripture, you will find that there's about 256 verses, 256 scriptures that talk about God's anger. That God has anger, that God is getting angry in situations with His people, with different things. And I'm sure all of you have heard about the story of Jesus, that He goes into the temple and He clears out the temple of all the money changers. And it is clear that there is an anger involved in this. But in His anger, He does not sin. And so we need to talk about that. See, God has given us the capacity to be angry. It is a God-given gift for us to be able to be angry. So anger isn't the problem. It's what we do with our anger. It has to be managed. It has to be controlled. Because if anger's not controlled, guess what it's going to do to you? It will control you. If you don't control it or manage it, it is going to control or try to manage you. And we have to be aware of this. And the thing is, it can control us in a lot of different ways. For some people, anger will make them red in the face. It's going to send up a slew of curse words, and everyone's going to know that this person's mad. You know those people in your life, right? You know they're upset. You don't have to ask. They came out like a furnace against you or against the world or whatever, and you see their anger. It is on full display. Some people are like that. Some people, anger turns them manipulative. Anger turns them to try to play the victim of any situation so that they might get others to feel sorry for them because they're angry. Still, for others, anger will make them sarcastic or maybe just passive-aggressive. When they're mad, you'll ask them, "Hey, how's everything going?" "Oh, it's fine." And you know it is not. Some of you may be married to someone. Whenever those words come out their mouth, you say, "Oh no, button down the hatches. It is not fine. What did I do? What did the kids do? Who do I need to go beat up?" That's what I tell my daughters whenever they're upset with things. I'm like, "All right, I'm dad. Who do I need to go beat up for you?" I usually don't. But sometimes you get mad for certain situations. Just because you don't have an explosive anger doesn't mean, though, that you aren't at risk of it controlling you. Even those of us who might get passive-aggressive in our anger can easily be controlled just as much as someone who is explosive in their anger. See, a lot of times I would be tempted to look at someone who goes into fits of rage, as we might even say, that they start cussing and doing all sorts of things that are outside visible, and they are horrible. And we may be thinking, you should never do that, and you call yourself a Christian, right? No way that should be a part of your life. The thing is, what I've realized in my own life is I don't do that, but I can become passive-aggressive in my anger. And someone ought to point their finger at me sometimes and say, wow, Mitch, just as much as the person who turns red-faced and cusses a slew of curse words, you are doing the same because you're letting anger control your situation, control your life. It just looks very different. Just because it looks different doesn't mean it's not the same motivating force, because anger can control me into being a silent assassin just as much as someone who is verbally abusive. See, when anger is calling the shots in your life, people notice. No matter how outward it may appear, people notice. And people don't want to be around angry people. You notice that? You've probably seen that in your own life. You're okay if you're being angry, but if someone else is angry, you don't really want to be around them. Proverbs actually has a few things that wisdom to say in that few passages here. Short-tempered people do foolish things, and schemers are hated. I like Proverbs. Just tells it how it is. A hot-tempered person starts fights. A cool-tempered person stops them. An angry person starts fights. A hot-tempered person commits all kinds of sin. I know the people they're talking about. I don't know how they're still alive, but we're talking about the same people. I know them. I've got names and faces in my mind of people that fit those categories. And that's unfortunate because sometimes others can look at me and say, yeah, Mitch, you fit those too. Because sometimes I let my anger get the best of me. We all struggle. Bottom line is, anger out of control always leaves ruin and destruction in its wake. It never leaves anything positive in its wake whenever it's out of control. Relationships get destroyed, families get torn apart, marriages get blown up, nations will begin to overflow with violence, hatred, bitterness, and division. It doesn't take a very long look in our society to realize that we have a whole bunch of anger issues. We are angry with each other. We are angry with ourselves. We're angry with our government. We're angry with alternatives of government. We're all angry with every little thing that we could possibly be angry with. And the relational cost of our anger is severe. No one wants a friend who is angry. No one wants a system of government that seems to be fed and fueled by anger. No one wants to be around it. But anger doesn't just cause problems in our relationships with one another. It also causes problems in our relationship with God. Check out what James says in James 1 verse 20. He says, human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. So get rid of all filth and evil in your lives and humbly accept the word God has planted in your hearts, for it has the power to save your souls. Do you hear what this verse is saying? Do you pick up what it's putting down? You will never live a life that God desires if you let anger control your life. That's what it's saying. It says it simply, human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires, but then it goes one level deeper and it says, your anger, the way that you're trying to live being controlled by anger, is filth and evil in God's sight. That's what we're talking about. Anger isn't something, everyone gets mad, and we can just pass that off of saying, they'll get over it, it'll be fine. No. See, the thing is, the hooks of anger come into your life and they don't let go very easily. And all I have to do to check, all anyone has to do to check to see if anger is still part of your life, is to mention the someone or the something that made you so angry previously, whatever it was. You just mention it. Do you feel yourself? No, you can just bring it up in your mind's eye. Remember the last time that you just got so angry, and now, you got that moment? whatever it was that you just got so upset. Okay? You may just be thinking like an hour ago. It may not be very long ago for you. Okay? It's fine. Do you notice your body tense up? Just thinking about it? Maybe you looked down and you saw that you actually had your hand in a fist. That's not uncommon. You tense up whenever you're around anger. And if it still has a hold on you, you physically feel it. And that is a great warning sign to remember, hey, hold on, hold up. I do not need to let this control me. If you are a person who unleashes your anger in unhealthy and ungodly ways, your life is full of moral filth and evil. And we need to do better. We need to get rid of that kind of anger. Remember what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5:21, he says, "You have heard it said that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment." I think that's a great rule, don't you? I mean, that's a great, all nations should have this rule that if you commit murder, you should be subject to judgment. But I say, if you're even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. Hold up, Jesus. It went from, that escalated quickly, is maybe the way to say that. Murder to anger. That's a big jump, right? Or is it? Or is it? It says if you're even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I got some problems. I got some confessing that I need to do. Because I drive, and there are idiots out on the road, and I call them such. Okay, the thing is, sometimes I say that jokingly. Sometimes I really mean it. And whenever I really mean it, but even whenever I'm joking, I need to be careful. Because that is Satan's little hook, just waiting to say, oh yeah, you think they're an idiot. Let's lean into that. You know, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but my wife isn't here this morning. Probably a female driving that car, right? So I'm going to get in trouble, I know. But here's the thing. There's a little bit more hook, and I make assumptions about the person. You know, they're probably a certain political belief. Oh, they're probably a whatever. And these hooks that are just starting because I started with the fact that I think they're an idiot because they did something that I wouldn't have done on the road. And in all reality, what is happening is it's being proven exactly who the idiot is in the situation. Because I am letting my anger start to control me. And I am letting the situation that I'm in boil my blood, and it really doesn't matter. Oh, I think it matters at the time, don't you? But whenever you take a step back and you think, that was the difference of about 4 seconds of my life being behind that idiot. And I'm willing to lose my soul over 4 seconds? Who's the bigger idiot? I know I'm using that word a lot, and that may be uncomfortable for people, and I get it. I'm just saying that's real. That's the struggle. And if you curse someone, you don't have to go very far in our society to hear someone curse someone else, right? I mean, we hear it with all sorts of words. Not just the Lord's name in vain, but all sorts of other coarse words that are directed toward a person, toward a people group. It's not just murder that will end us up in hell. It's letting our anger get the best of us. Because anger's path is really, when left unchecked, is not a path that any of us want to take. It's not okay to let our anger with someone hinder the relationship. And this is something that we really need to understand, we need to get. Your anger should not dictate the relationship you have with someone who is of a different political belief than you. They may support different things of policies, and you're like, how can you be a Christian and still support something like that? Your anger should not dictate your relationship with them. Your anger should not dictate the relationship you have with someone who claims to be LGBTQ plus or whatever they decide to have as their identity. You may not agree with it, you may not even understand it, but letting your anger dictate the relationship is not going to end well in the name of Christ. You shouldn't let your anger dictate your relationship with someone from another denomination or even from another religion for that matter. Because when we let our anger control our relationships, we let it control our lives. Far too many Christians have let their disagreements with others fuel a fire of anger in their lives. And Jesus doesn't look too kindly upon anyone who lets anger dictate their lives. So what's the advice? What's the best way to deal with anger? Well, you have probably heard this from your mom or back in school when you were little. It's a very simple way to deal with anger. Stop and count to 10. You've heard that one, right? When you get angry, stop and count to 10. Now, this is wonderful advice on many levels. In fact, a lot of these stupid things that we end up doing in our anger could be avoided if we just paused for a moment, counted to 10, and even thought, why am I angry? What exactly am I angry about? Is it worth being angry about? Is this something God would be angry about? It takes me about 10 seconds to answer all those questions because usually I get past the first one and it's a nope. It is not worth being angry about. But there are some things that, yes, it is worth being angry about. Yes, it is something that God would be angry about. So yes, my anger is justified, but now still I've taken some time to make sure that my motivation in my anger and what I do with my anger is also justified. James 1:19 says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. I look at that and say, hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? You pick your 2. I am not slow to speak usually, so that's my struggle, but quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to get angry, we need all 3. And for some odd reason, they seem to go hand in hand, don't they? When we listen more quickly than we speak, we often get angry less. But when we speak before we fully listened, not only do we get angry, we also make the other person angry. And it's a perpetuating cycle that does no one any good. Jesus actually gave us a really good example of stopping and counting to 10, okay? It was how he did it. He didn't stop and count to 10, but it's where we get this idea is James and then also in Mark. I mentioned earlier about Jesus going to the temple and clearing the temple of the money changers. Let's look at that story. Starting Mark 11, verse 11. So Jesus came to Jerusalem. He went to the temple. After looking around carefully at everything, he left because it was late in the afternoon. Then he returned to Bethany with his 12 disciples. Jumping now to verse 15, we'll pick back up the story. When they arrived back in Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out the people buying and selling animals for sacrifices. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those those selling doves. And he stopped everyone from using the temple as a marketplace. He said to them, "The scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." There is no doubt that Jesus was angry with what he saw. There's no way to read this story and see, well, Jesus was just, he wasn't angry, and try to put it in some other category. No, Jesus is clearly angry with what he saw. The problem, what he saw was animals being sold as sacrifices. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's how they were doing it. So a little bit of background to understand maybe what they were doing. They had turned the sacrificial system into a lucrative business. If you go read Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, a lot of the law, you'll find out that there was a really specific kind of sacrifice that God desired. I mean, it had to be a year-old, unblemished, a perfect kind of sacrifice. And so to uphold this law, the priest, as people would come to bring their sacrifices, the priest would inspect the animal that they were going to give for sacrifice. That's no problem. That's actually a really good way of honoring what God desires. Make sure there's no blemishes. Because if God says no blemishes, he means no blemishes, so let's not give him something that he doesn't want. And so they check it. The problem comes, though, whenever someone realized one day, you know what, we can make some money. It's not really a hard system because we control the whole market. So the priest would inspect the sheep. Let's say a sheep comes to him. They'll inspect it. And then they'll look at the traveler and say, I'm sorry, this sheep has a blemish. This sheep is not acceptable. This traveler is at the mercy of the priest because the priest is the one who's going to sacrifice it. There's no higher up the chain. Talk to your manager. No, this is it. So the priest says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll buy this sheep from you so that you can go purchase another one. But since this sheep has a blemish, it's going to be at this cost. It's going to be a reduced price. So the person has nothing else they can do. They buy the sheep at the reduced price. This sheep goes over to the other side, and then this priest directs him to his other priest fellows that are selling approved sacrificial sheep. And they walk over there, and he has to buy it. Now it's at a higher price because demand and market, we all know how that works. We've seen gas prices, right? And so over there, the sheep is more expensive. There's actually some evidence that they took the sheep that they said was blemished, and they sold, or that they bought from the person there's evidence that they took it around back and put it in the pen of the ones that they said were acceptable for sacrifice. That's some shady business, right? But that's what's happening. And there's no doubt when Jesus saw it, he was livid. He was upset. I have no doubt that in the moment he sees it, he is upset. But notice in that passage, the moment that he saw it, what he did. Verse 11. After looking around carefully at everything, he left and returned to Bethany with the 12 disciples. In other words, he stopped, he counted to 10, and he slept on it. Even Matthew, whenever it's telling a story, doesn't say that he left and went to Bethany for the night, but it says that he stopped and he fashioned a whip. That takes some time. I don't know if you've ever made a whip. It takes some time. He didn't just have this outburst of anger. He had it, and he controlled it, and he made sure that he was doing it what we might call a righteous anger. In fact, that's where we understand this idea of a righteous anger. His anger is a catalyst for righteousness. He uses his anger for something that God desires and God honors. Now, that is something to do with our anger. Usually we don't, right? Usually we let our anger get the worst of us. Jesus let his anger be the best for God. He took his time because he was angry with the mistreatment of worship and the mistreatment of people who are there to worship. That is a righteous anger. And notice, though, how Jesus responded is he flipped tables. He didn't flip people. Or maybe I should add, he flipped off the tables, but not the people, because that's what we do. We often go to one and we miss the righteous anger. We need to be careful in what we do with our anger. See, anger is a powerfully motivating force. It'll get you to do things you never thought you could. Yet at the same time, if left unchecked, it is a terrible master. Don't let anger be your master. Instead, follow Jesus' example and use the anger. If it is good and holy and righteous anger, things to truly be upset about, use it to promote people toward God, to promote people toward righteousness. Channel your anger in such a way that Jesus would say, that's my boy. That's exactly what I would have done if I was in your situation. I don't know how many of you have been struggling with anger this week. I don't know how many of you struggle with anger on a constant basis. But if you are one of those people, you know that it is a hard road to keep straight on. Because anger can come out sideways, and it's your loved ones that get the brunt of it. And if you want help managing your anger, if you want prayers from this congregation, that's what we're here for. We may not be able to fix all of it, but sometimes just admitting that you have an anger problem is enough of a first step. And I believe that Jesus is enough to help you with whatever you're dealing with. So this morning, if you need any help, would you let it be known? Come as we stand and sing together.